My name is Uri. I am product manager here at CI Technologies, and as Eric mentioned, I'm going to talk about pipeline as code. So let's talk a little bit about 1994. 1994 was a very interesting year, and a lot of really cool stuff happened in that year. So Friends, for example, was a very successful sitcom, and it had its first season premiered in 1994. Also, Forrest Gump, a great movie, had its premiere on July the 6th, 1994. Forrest was talking about that fruit company, and the stock price of that company was less than $1 in 1994. Also, IBM came up with the first laptop that has its own CD-ROM, CD drive, as part of the laptop. And if you wanted to buy a 3-bedroom house in San Francisco, the median price was $274,000. A lot of stuff has changed over the 20 years, 20-something years that passed since 1994, and I wish we knew some of that information back in the day. Another very interesting thing happened in that year. The second edition of the book Object-Oriented Analysis and Design was out, and that was the first time when the term continuous integration was used. It wasn't exactly the same term as we know today, but it definitely laid out the foundation for what we know as continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous testing, and continuous deployment. A lot has changed since 1994, right? I mean, you cannot buy a house in San Francisco for $247,000, right? The stock price of Apple is way more than $1. I think the only thing that really remained the same is that Forrest Gump is still an awesome movie. Continuous integration also changed quite a lot, and it's became a very common practice today among developers. So one of the things that happened after people started to adopt continuous integration, continuous delivery, and all these other practices is that the number of deployments increased significantly, right? We're doing much more deployments today than we did in the past. One of the main reasons for that is that deployments and releases are not just for ops guys anymore, right? Developers are doing deployments as part of their daily job. For example, we do a deployment every time we commit a change, right? We commit a change, then we create a build, the build gets deployed, and then we're running some tests to make sure that the functionality that we just described is working. Or we may have the hourly build, where every hour we create another build, collecting all the stuff that were committed in the last hour, and we're running some end-to-end tests to make sure that nothing has been broken in our service. And of course, we have the nightly, right? Every night, we also create another build where we run a more set of extensive tests to make sure that all the integrations are working as expected. And of course, in some really matured companies, this build, if everything is working as expected, gets deployed into the production environment. So what does it really take in order to achieve that fully automated CI/CD pipeline? So first, you need to have a well-connected tool chains. All the products you're using to develop, deploy, test, and monitor, they all need to work together in a seamless and automated way. You also need to have a simple way to provision your testing environments, right? So whenever you want to run some testing cycles, you need to make sure that all the testing environments and all the test assets are ready for you to use in an automated way. You also need a way to standardize your pipeline so you can use it across multiple projects and multiple applications. And so you can also adjust it whenever the structure of your pipeline change. And of course, you need to have a reusable template that makes it easier to scale. The best way and the easiest way to do it is obviously to code your pipeline. You want to use the same structure, the same languages you're already using for your development process, again, on your deployment processes, right? You want to use your JSON or YAML files or any other scripting language you're already using for developing for the deployment process, right? And that makes it much easier to create your releases. Adopting pipeline as code really makes the life of the developers much easier on a CI pipeline. First, you can tokenize your pipeline. You can have one generic file that contain all the structure and the content and the commands you want to run as part of your release execution, and you can replace the tokens with the actual files for this specific build, right? The build number, the location of the files, and etc. So you can create one concrete file that contains everything you want for that specific pipeline execution. Also, we can modify whenever you want to use the same file across different applications and different teams. Also, since you're using the same technologies as you're using for your own development processes, it's very easy to debug your pipeline when something is not working as expected. And of course, it's very easy to collaborate because the other people in my team probably know the same structure, the same technology I'm using, so they can share the same pipeline with me. Having said all that, as code is great and it's been very well adopted by the industry, especially by the developers. However, pipeline as code is not enough because we know that developers are not the only people that use our pipeline, right? We have the ops guys, we have the managers, we have the person people, and they also want to have some insight about the pipeline and its progress. And they're probably not going to look into a console in order to understand the status of the pipeline. So you definitely need to have a visualization layer on top of your as code approach. Also, you need to make sure that you don't have just a build pipeline, you need to make sure you have a release pipeline, because we know that build lifecycle is very short. Most of the builds do not end up in production. However, when you want to deploy set of requirements into the production, you probably need to have multiple builds until the last one, the one that is actually successful, end up in the production. We have just launched, as Eric mentioned, a new service called citydirector.io. It's available for you as a free trial that helps you to manage the whole process of taking requirements all the way to production, and you can use it against any other solution you're already using as part of your pipeline execution. That can be open source, commercial or homegrown solution. All this stuff can work seamlessly with our solution. So feel free to come over, see how it works here, or try it yourself online.